My name is Saima. I'm 39, a mother, a part-time librarian, and a woman still figuring out who she is after years of pretending to be fine. Since my divorce 3 years ago, life has revolved around routines. Coffee at 6, lunch at 1, silence by 9. My son, Denial, now in university, only visits on the weekends. That quiet house of mine feels too large and too still most days. It was on one of those weekends that Zayan first stepped into our home. Denial had mentioned him before. His roommate, study partner, and best friend from campus. But no description prepared me for the composed, thoughtful young man who entered my kitchen carrying a box of pastries and a shy smile. He wasn't like other boys his age. There was a calmness about him, a way he listened when others only waited to speak. He offered to help set the table, then washed the dishes without being asked. At first, I chalked it up to good upbringing. But even then, something about his presence shifted the energy in the house. That evening, as Denial watched TV, Zayan wandered into the kitchen where I was prepping dinner. "Auntie," he said, "can I watch how you make dal? I've never been able to get it right." Chuckled. "It's not an art form," I replied, half amused. But he stayed, and watched, and asked questions. Not the kind people ask out of politeness, but real ones. He noticed the spice ratios, the way I let the onions brown slowly, and even offered to stir while I chopped. For the first time in years, I had someone in the kitchen with me who wasn't just hungry, but curious. Became a weekend routine. While Denial napped or played games, Zayan would slip into the kitchen, always eager to learn. I began to look forward to our quiet cooking sessions. I told myself it was harmless. He was just a respectful young man, and I was just grateful for the company. Still, I couldn't ignore the subtle warmth I felt whenever he complimented my cooking or brought ingredients he thought I might need. One Saturday afternoon, I reached for the turmeric while explaining a recipe. Our hands touched, barely a second, and yet it sent an unexpected jolt through me. I pulled back quickly, brushing it off with a laugh. He didn't say anything, but his gaze lingered, as if he, too, had noticed the silence that followed. That night, as I sat alone sipping tea, I found myself thinking about Zayan, not as my son's friend, but as someone who made my house feel a little less empty. And that was the first sign that something was beginning to simmer, quietly, gently, but dangerously. It's strange how quickly something innocent can start to feel intimate. The kitchen, once a place of noise and obligation, had turned into something softer. Every Saturday, Zayan arrived with fresh vegetables, a new spice he had found, or a recipe printed out with highlighted steps. He always made it look casual, but I sensed intention behind every visit. We cooked side by side like clockwork. Our conversations grew deeper. He no longer asked only about recipes. Instead, he asked about my life. "What made you want to become a librarian? Do you ever miss being married?" Questions that paused my hands mid-chop. No one had asked me those things in years. Not with sincerity, not with care. He spoke about his own past too. How he had lost his mother young. How cooking reminded him of her. How quiet made him anxious, and how he liked the way our home smelled. Of cinnamon, cumin, and something he couldn't quite name. It was easy to forget who he was. He didn't feel like my son's friend anymore. He felt like someone who saw me. Not as a mother, not as a cook, but as a woman with dreams long tucked away. And yet, I clung to the boundary, reminding myself silently. He's Denial's friend. He's just being kind. Don't overthink it. But feelings aren't recipes. You can't measure them in teaspoons or boil them down until they make sense. One evening, while making a loup parathe, I struggled to roll the dough evenly. He laughed softly, took the rolling pin from my hand, and tried it himself. Our fingers brushed again. I froze, expecting him to pull away, but he didn't. His hand rested lightly on mine, guiding the dough, lingering just a second too long. I looked up. His eyes held mine, and in that moment, the kitchen felt suspended in time. Quiet, charged, waiting. I stepped back, trying to steady my breath. "We should finish before Denial wakes up," I said, forcing a smile. Zayan nodded, but the air between us had changed. No longer just flour and spices. It carried weight, the weight of something unspoken. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the wind outside and the echo of his voice in my memory. "You're more than you let on, Auntie. You still shine, you just don't see it." I told myself I was being foolish. That it was a fleeting emotion, a product of loneliness. But deep down I knew something was shifting. I had allowed it to. Worse, a part of me wanted it to. What began with recipes and laughter was slowly simmering into something harder to contain. Something that no apron or oven mitt could protect me from. And though I hadn't crossed a line yet, I was dangerously close. For weeks, I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it all, that the tension, the closeness, the late-night thoughts were nothing but a lapse in judgment brought on by loneliness. But denial only works when the heart cooperates, and mine was no longer listening to reason. Denial remained blissfully unaware. He would come and go, caught up in his own world of studies, exams, and the occasional weekend movie night. But Zayan's presence became more persistent, arriving early, staying late, and finding excuses to linger even after dinner had long been cleared. One Friday evening, Denial announced he'd be staying over at a friend's place due to a group project. I nodded, pretending not to notice the shift in my chest, equal parts guilt and something else I dared not name. Zayan showed up the next afternoon with fresh lemons, herbs, and a recipe for grilled fish. "I thought we could try something new," he said, his smile soft, unreadable. The kitchen was quiet, save for the soft sizzle from the stove and the occasional clink of utensils. We moved around each other with a rhythm that had become familiar, comfortable yet charged. As we plated the food, our hands brushed again. But this time, neither of us moved away. His fingers curled slightly around mine, holding, not just touching. "You're always so strong," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I see the sadness in your eyes. I wish you didn't have to hide it." His words caught me off guard, and I turned to face him. There was no smirk, no mischief, only sincerity. My voice cracked when I replied, "Some things aren't meant to be shared." "Maybe they are," he said. "With the right person." I should have walked away then. I should have said something, anything, to break the moment. But instead I stood there, frozen between caution and craving. And then, without permission or planning, he reached out and gently cupped my cheek. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't anything dramatic. Just the warmth of his hand against my skin. Simple, soft, and utterly irreversible. I stepped back. "Zayan," I said, the word trembling as it left my lips. "This can't happen." He nodded slowly, lowering his hand, but the damage was done. A line had been crossed, not with passion but with emotion. A betrayal not of body, but of trust. That night, I cleaned the kitchen 3 times over, scrubbing dishes that were already spotless. No matter how much I wiped, I couldn't rid myself of the feeling that everything had changed. And it had. Because now, it wasn't just about what might happen. It was about what already had. The following days were slow and uneasy, like waiting for something to fall that you'd tried too long to hold up. I began avoiding the kitchen. The very place that had once offered comfort now felt layered with tension. I cooked quietly, quickly, without conversation. If Zayan noticed the change, he didn't say anything. But his visits became less about recipes and more about lingering stares, heavy silences, and unspoken thoughts. Denial sensed something. He wasn't a child anymore. And no matter how much I tried to keep my tone even or my expressions neutral, mothers underestimate how much their children notice. One evening, he stood at the kitchen door while I was rinsing dishes. His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Is there something going on with you and Zayan?" I dropped the plate. It shattered, a sound more deafening than any accusation. "No," I lied instantly, too fast to be convincing. He didn't press me, but the look on his face said enough. Suspicion had taken root. Trust was shifting. The next weekend, Denial came home early. I hadn't expected him. Zayan was already in the kitchen, casually cutting fruit, as if everything were still normal. Denial stood in the doorway, eyes darting between us. "Why does he keep coming here?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Zayan looked at me, waiting for me to answer. Couldn't. My mouth went dry. That night, Denial left without a word. Zayan tried to talk, but I told him not to come back. "This, whatever it is, it's not right," I said. He trusted both of us. Zayan's expression was unreadable. Disappointed, maybe even wounded, but he nodded. "You're right. I'm sorry." When the door closed behind him, the silence returned. But this time it wasn't peaceful. It was cold, like something precious had been broken and couldn't be pieced together again. In the days that followed, I tried to rebuild what I could with my son. I didn't explain everything, but I didn't deny the emotional betrayal either. He didn't say much. Some things, once cracked, take time to mend, if they mend at all. Now the kitchen is quiet again. The spices sit untouched, the weekend recipes forgotten. I still cook, still stir, still serve, but something is missing. Not Zayan. Not the excitement. But the illusion that I could step outside the lines of my life without consequence. I often stare at the spot where he once stood, hands deep in flour, eyes full of curiosity. And I whisper to myself, some ingredients, no matter how tempting, don't belong in the recipe. Because love without boundaries isn't love. It's a mistake dressed as desire. And every mistake, no matter how warm it once felt, leaves behind a bitter aftertaste.